You know, for over a century, the American auto industry felt like this untouchable fortress, built and defended by absolute giants. But here's the crazy part. A battle that took 100 years to build is being completely redefined in like less than a decade. This is the story of that epic clash, the old guard versus the new king.
So get this, back in 2021, a company that wasn't even around 20 years ago sent this massive shockwave through the entire global economy. Tesla hit a market capitalization of $1 trillion. And for this one brief, absolutely stunning moment, it was worth more than pretty much every other car maker on the planet combined.
And that right there, that's the big question we're tackling in this explainer. Look, this isn't just a story about electric cars. No way. It's a fundamental showdown between the industrial empires of Detroit, built on massive factories and brand loyalty, and a Silicon Valley upstart built on software, data, and a totally different vision for the future.
All right, so to really get what's happening today, we've got to go back. We need to look at the DNA of these legacy giants. Their strategies were so powerful, they literally wrote the rulebook for modern industry. A rulebook that's now being completely ripped to shreds.
Okay, take a look at this. The thing that just jumps out at you is the timeline, right? Ford, GM, and Chrysler basically owned the 20th century. They built the arsenal of democracy during World War II and then powered the American dream for decades. Tesla doesn't even show up until a whole new century. And each one of these giants had its own secret sauce, its own playbook for how to dominate.
So let's start with GM. Their secret weapon was a guy named Alfred Sloan, and he was a marketing genius. He created what's known as Sloan's ladder. The idea was simple but brilliant. You'd start out with, say, an affordable Chevy. As you made more money and got a better job, GM was right there waiting for you with a Pontiac, then a Buick, all the way up to the ultimate prize, a Cadillac. It was an incredible way to keep a customer for life.
Then you've got Henry Ford. He was obsessed with something totally different, the machine that builds the machine. His whole strategy was vertical integration. I mean, Ford didn't just assemble cars. They owned the rubber plantations, the steel mills, the whole shebang. This gave him absolute control, letting him pump out cars on a scale the world had never, ever seen before. And that's what made the car affordable for pretty much everyone.
And then there's Chrysler. I always think of them as the scrappy survivor, the innovator. Chrysler's playbook was to zig when everyone else zagged. When they were on the ropes, they didn't just try to compete. They created whole new markets. Think about it. In the 80s, they literally invented the minivan. And then in 1987, they made one of the smartest buys in business history. They snapped up Jeep, which is now the crown jewel of their parent company, Stellantis.
But, you know, these empires, as powerful as they weren't invincible. The second half of the 20th century threw 3 huge crises their way, and each one hammered home a really painful lesson.
Okay, so first, bam, the oil crisis in the 70s. Suddenly, their big, gas-guzzling cars looked like dinosaurs, and these small, efficient Japanese cars flooded the market. Next up, those same competitors started a quality revolution. Their cars just worked better, and that really hurt trust in American brands. But the real knockout punch? That was the 2008 financial crisis. I mean, it was a total near-death experience. GM and Chrysler went bankrupt and needed government bailouts. Ford only survived because it mortgaged everything it owned, right down to the blue oval logo itself. The lesson was brutal. Adapt or you will die.
And that lesson, that brutal adapt or die moment, is exactly what sets the stage for today's fight. The big three made it through, and they're leaner and meaner. But the competition isn't about horsepower anymore. Now the game is all about batteries, it's about software, and it's a completely new rulebook for how you build and sell cars.
So the big question is, where's all the money for this massive fight coming from? And this slide right here tells you everything you need to know. For the big three, Ford, GM, and Stellantis, it's simple. Trucks and big SUVs. That's their cash cow. It's their war chest. The Ford F-Series, America's best seller for almost 50 years. GM's big SUVs. And of course, Jeep and Ram for Stellantis. And then you have Tesla. Their money comes from the very thing everyone else is chasing, building high-margin electric vehicles from the ground up.
And if we dig a little deeper into those truck numbers, there's this really cool rivalry going on. So yeah, you always hear that the Ford F-Series is the best-selling truck. And it is. As a single nameplate, it's a beast. But here's the twist. If you actually add up the Chevy Silverado and the GMC Sierra, which are both GM trucks, General Motors as a whole actually sells more pickups than anyone. It's a fascinating battle of a single iconic brand versus a powerful portfolio.
Okay, let's switch gears and talk about the disruptor. This quote right here. Tesla's real product isn't the car, it's the factory. Whew, man, that just nails it. While Detroit spent a century perfecting the assembly line, Tesla basically looked at 100 years of car making and said, "We can do this better." They rethought the whole thing from scratch, building these massive gigafactories to make cars more efficiently than anyone thought possible.
And by focusing on the factory, Tesla built these three huge competitive advantages, these moats around its business, that are just incredibly hard for anyone else to copy. First, they do everything themselves: software, batteries, even their own computer chips. Second, they built their own charging network, the Superchargers, which solved a huge headache for early EV buyers. And this is the big one. Every Tesla on the road is like a little robot, constantly collecting real-world data and sending it back, making the entire fleet smarter every single day.
So with all that said, where does the race actually stand today? Okay, so this chart of the US market shows Tesla is still way out in front. No surprise there. But look closer. GM, after pouring a ton of money into their new Ultium battery platform, has jumped into a really solid #2 spot, even pulling ahead of Ford. The old guard is definitely in the fight, and they are clawing back market share.
What's really interesting is that they're not all taking the same approach. Each of the big three is basically placing a different bet on the future. GM is going all in, betting the farm on a pure EV future with its one-size-fits-all Ultium platform. Ford tried to create a nimble EV startup inside the company, but now they're leaning more into popular hybrids. And Stellantis, they're offering a bit of everything: gas, hybrid, or EV, letting the customer decide.
But man, this transition, it is just incredibly eye-wateringly expensive. Look at this number. That's how much Ford's EV division lost in a single year, nearly $5 billion. It's the perfect example of that classic business problem. How do you pay for a new, money-losing future while your old business is still making all the cash?
And the stakes here, they are absolutely astronomical. Check this out. Stellantis, the parent company of Chrysler, Jeep, and Ram, booked a net loss of over $26 billion in 2025. A huge chunk of that was the cost of hitting the brakes and resetting their big EV plants because things were moving a little slower than they expected. It just shows you, the price for getting the strategy wrong is just immense.
And all of this really points to the true endgame here. It's not just about swapping a gas engine for a battery. The real goal is to completely change how they make money. GM says that by 2030, they think they can make up to $25 billion a year from stuff like software subscriptions for their hands-free driving system, Super Cruise. They're trying to turn a car from a one-time purchase into a recurring source of revenue, just like Tesla.
So after all that, we come back to the big question: who's actually going to win the battle for the American road? On one hand, the big three have their incredibly profitable truck businesses to fund the fight. But on the other, Tesla got a massive head start building a company designed for this new era from the ground up.
And this, right here, really sums up the whole conflict perfectly. On one side, you have the legacy giants. They've got things money can't easily buy: decades of brand loyalty, huge dealer networks, and just massive manufacturing scale. But on the other side, the disruptor has its own deep moats: amazing software, that huge data flywheel we talked about, and total control over its tech. And now, everybody is fighting on the same battlefield for the same stuff: batteries and the smartest engineers.
And that leaves us with one final massive question. Can a 100-year-old giant, an empire that invented this industry, really learn to move and innovate like a company that was built for the future from scratch? Or does the future just belong to the company that was designed for it from day one? We don't have the answer yet, but the next decade on the American road is definitely going to give it to us.